Everyone wants to pay less for real estate, and you will get properties for cheaper if you use the negotiation strategies I'm about to give you in this session. I guarantee it. We're actually training up a new acquisitions rep right now. And for the first month, he was learning about the sales process. Now, in this second month, I've been working with him very closely on sharpening his skills so he can get properties for cheaper, and he's getting sellers down on prices. So this stuff's really fresh in my mind right now. I'm about to share it all with you today, some key pro tips. First, we're going to kick it off with a giveaway, 25 free copies of the legendary rental property calculator or anything else on the ACE Toolkit store on InvestwithACE.com or our link in bio. It is first come, first serve. These 25 go fast. This video is posted on a variety of platforms and emailed to 70,000 people. So get over there, then come on back, watch the rest. The coupon code that you're going to enter at checkout is CLOSER. You could spell closer, all lowercase, it's just one word. Hurry up, get over there. If the code does not work, that means it's expired, it's been used up. All 25 have been redeemed, right? So just pay 45 bucks and get anything from the toolkit store that you want, because these things are really valuable if you're actually buying properties. Doesn't work for the course, by the way. The Virtual Investors Guide has never been couponed, never been discounted. I honestly don't give a shit if it sells anymore. We own a real estate investment firm. We're flipping a bunch of properties here. It's great accessory income, and it's a great learning tool for you guys if you're actually trying to buy properties out of state. So here's my little mini plug on it. If you really want to learn how to buy properties remotely like we are, our system is kind of packaged up into that Virtual Investors Guide. And it's a pretty damn good deal. It's not like the other fluff bullshit that you see like internet people putting out. Anyways, let's get straight to it. So I've got 8 negotiation tactics for you that kind of came to mind. This is pretty much stream of consciousness. I don't have a script or a rehearsal on this, right? And I think I want to kick this off by saying most investors don't start the negotiation until it's time to talk numbers. But a real negotiation, an effective negotiator, begins when the first word is said, right? So these tactics I'm going to share with you kind of go through, they're utilized throughout and at different points in the whole saga of a single real estate transaction. The second you start communicating with a seller about a property, right? All the way up to the closing table. So the first thing I'm going to give you is, and I tried to put these in an order that made sense. Some of them are like universal. Some of them are a little bit chronological throughout this like acquisitions process you'll follow. The first is energy. And it's really important that you match a seller's energy. I was sitting in on a practice call with the rep today, and he was real peppy and nice and kind of like, chipper with a 70-something-year-old seller in Indiana who was kind of tired of the bullshit he was dealing with his property, had a real mellow, almost existential demeanor to him, right? You don't want to bring a high level of energy to a sales conversation with someone that is inhibited. You want to act like them. Now, if they're high energy, you can kind of speed up your speech with them, but I would always start off a sales conversation with a lower and milder level of energy to open things up, and then let the other person show you where you're going to go, because you risk appearing eager by having a high energy, and you sometimes seem more serious or stoic, and perhaps not desperate if you have a muted tone to yourself. So I always initiate with that. Even though I'm a peppy guy, you see me on social media, that's not how my sales conversations are. The second thing that you want to exert to make you a more effective negotiator, and remember, these things are actually affecting the price the second you start using them. You don't realize it because you haven't talked about price yet, but the price is affected the second you start doing these things. Control over the conversation. Now, to control a conversation, you have to have a process in place that you know you're going to follow. Establish that. Please, I've made whole videos for you guys on sales process, acquisitions process, how to get the information out in the right order and say the right things in order to make the deal kind of get to the finish line. When you have a process in place, the second you're talking to somebody on the other line, if I pick up a phone with a seller, and I took a couple first kind of cold, just called the inbound calls for the sake of demonstrating to this new rep. I haven't done it in years. You tell them exactly why you're here. And as soon as they engage, hey, let's talk, I've got a second, I'm telling them exactly what's going to happen throughout this process. I'm saying, hey, this is Elliot with ACE. Hey, I'm just calling you back. We're the investors that were interested in possibly buying your rental property. Do you have a second to talk? They say yes. And I immediately go into, hey, here's what my plan is for this conversation. And this is how I always open up my first conversation. For the first talk that we have about this property, I just want to gather some basic information to see if this is even something we can buy and make sure we're in the same ballpark. That way I can go and crunch my numbers, do some research. I don't want to waste your time until we kind of get past that first checkpoint. And then we could dig in and have more of a conversation and see if there's something to be had here after that. Can I start with a couple basic questions, right? And then they know what you expect of them. And now you're in control by establishing a process, and then you just have to maintain it throughout. If the seller starts to veer, you bring them back. The biggest thing that happens is they start talking about all the upgrades they've done to the property or the condition, and I just want to know the rents. I just want to know the address, the number of units. Does it have a garage? Does it have a basement? What is it? And what's it renting for? And what are the utilities? And what do you want for the property? I don't want to talk about the condition yet. I might ask, now, just in general, are there any major repairs, or is it in just pretty decent condition overall? We can get into it more on the next call, right? But the second they veer, I pull them right back, and I'll interrupt them too. I'll say, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get to some of the financials right now because condition's a deep rabbit hole and we just don't even know if we're in the same ballpark yet. So please help me get my numbers together. Control is extremely important. It establishes you as an authority. When you're an authority, they're going to take you more seriously. When you're an authority and you have a process and you're following it, it shows you know what you're doing. You have a game plan. They don't feel like it's going to be so easy to sway you, right? The third thing that you want to establish early on, and this is internal, it's psychological, it's detachment. Now, if you're a salesperson, being detached is probably the most important thing you can do to be successful as a salesperson, because when you get emotional, you act out of character, you don't see things for what they are, and you don't appropriately utilize your judgment and your time, because some people are just not going to sell to you or give you the price you want regardless. But if you're so desperate to get the deal, you'll do everything you can to make it work. You'll try to, I see people do this all the time. Our sales reps do it all the time. They'll increase the ARV on the property artificially because the seller's asking a lot. And I'm like, hey, that other seller that was asking way lower and it was a home run deal, you priced it super conservatively. Why is this one pumped? Oh, because the seller's asking more. I was trying to build a spread into it. No, that's not how it works, dude. You got to not give a fuck what happens to this deal, and you got to make it clear to the seller early on. Notice I said in my first pitch about, when I was mentioning this control bit, I tell the seller in this first conversation, I just want to see if it's even something we can buy. I'm not attached to buying this property. I'm trying to see if I am interested or not. And you carry that same energy throughout, even through the end of the call, where oftentimes when I ask for an asking price, I might say, based on the information I gathered, hey, it doesn't sound like this property is something you want to give me much of a break on. And, obviously I'm running a business, so I need to make some money. Do you have an asking price for me that leaves me enough room? Put it right out there. Don't be afraid of losing the deal. In fact, even kind of give them the opportunity to opt to not work with you after you've established your value, why they should, and all that stuff, right? But make sure you always give the opportunity for them to make the choice to not work with you, and don't make them feel like you don't want them to have that option. Detachment's extremely important. Number 4 is order. The order in which you ask questions is extremely important in negotiation, because you want to ask the questions that, 1, allow you to qualify and make decisions early on, but 2, allow you to pry for leverage that is highly likely to appear earlier in the conversation. There's a reason the very first thing I ask after finding out what the address is and how many units a property is, hey, what's it renting for? Because what a property is renting for will give you all the ammo. It'll tell you 80% of what you need to know about the property, right? If you know market rents in an area are $1,000 per unit, and a seller comes to you and goes $600 a unit, I'm immediately going, in my head, these units are going to need work. These are long-term tenants, sure. Unlikely they're very clean, but there's a chance. I'm going to have to increase over time. I'm not making as much money at first, and we're going to have to compensate for that in the form of price, right? And I'm telling them that gently, by the way. So the order in which you ask questions is important. You want to lead to a certain outcome by uncovering things that could help you get the outcome that's important to you early on. And then number 5, feedback. All these questions you ask, everything that you say to a seller, everything that they say to you, you want to give an appropriate response. When they tell you that rent's $650 and market's $1,000, you go, hey, have they lived there a long time, John? Because 650 is pretty low for this area. And they go, well, no, they only moved in 2 years ago. Are you just, did you just price it low so you could easily find a tenant you don't have to deal with? Or am I gonna have to do some work to these units? Because usually, and without me knowing anything about the condition of this property, usually when I see a 650 rent in this area, I gotta go in and paint and floor it as soon as that tenant moves out. And I'm not gonna really make any money until they do move, and I don't push them out. So I'm just trying to understand what's going on with those 650 rents. Right? Feedback at every step along the way. Hey, the roof is older. Well, how old? Well, I don't know. I haven't replaced it since I bought it though. I'd guess somewhere around 20 years. You go, well, when did you buy it? Oh, back in 2005 or so. If it wasn't brand new when you bought it in 2005, maybe it's older than 20 years. I just want to make sure that I budget for a replacement if it's really at the end of lifespan, because there's a big difference between 20 and 28, right? But anyways, we could figure that out a little bit. If you don't have the exact information, that's fine. That's something we could figure out during an inspection, right? Feedback to every comment is extremely important. Number 6, now we're starting to get into the stuff that's not really chronological in the negotiation process, in like your acquisitions process. Number 6 is value. Your value to them. You want them to work with you. You don't want to beg them to work with you. You want to make it clear why they might work with you. Now, the best way to build value is through establishing credibility. Credibility comes from competence. Credibility comes from having a process and showing them that there's clarity in what you are doing with them, right? And I've kind of given you these tips, so there's a little bit of overlap in the value, but I want you to understand that building value, those are pieces of it, and you are actively doing things to build value throughout without pushing yourself, making it seem like you're trying to sell your value, right? Value comes from understanding what other alternatives are in the marketplace and why you are better. Value comes from you having money or a good business model and expressing that to them in the very beginning, right? So you're really, I think the most important thing is in this business, you're building value with a seller or even a realtor on the other end or a wholesaler just by showing you know what the fuck you're talking about. Because most people that they deal with just don't. So I can go over a million reasons or a million ways for you to build value. I think the most important way is people are going to hear your voice. And we've had sellers, like I've gotten on closing calls with sellers a million times, not to toot my own horn, and they go, Elliot, I can tell you're a serious guy. I don't need to call your title company. I don't need that extra earnest money deposit. They sign that contract quick. But maybe they talk to a rep in training and they go, well, I want a higher earnest money, right? That's not something that happens when you sound like you are the one that's going to get it done. Number 7 is locking up or setting up locks in advance for alternatives, right? Now it's really important. Like we just had a seller call Mike, my business partner, right now. And he said, hey, I already got it under contract. Sorry, we didn't get to him fast enough. Whoops, our bad. But let me send you some pictures and all of that anyways. And Mike was like, well, did the contract get canceled? And he's like, no, but just in case, I'm not so sure about him. All right. And Mike went, yeah, we see it all the time. They're probably wholesalers. There's a lot of them in this market. They're probably just trying to fish your property around to an investor. Sometimes those guys will pay you more than they should because they just want the contract and the opportunity to try to make a fee, right? And, immediately now you're setting up a lock for that person not being willing to take a lower price, right? We oftentimes in the beginning of a conversation will tell a seller, hey, I'm sure you figured when you called us that we're a business, so we got to make money, right? So naturally, we gotta be able to get the property for less than if you were to sell it with a realtor. But you don't have to go through all the things that you have to go through when you're working with a realtor either. Your tenants aren't going to get scared off, right? We're not going to inspect it until after we have a deal. And by the way, we buy cash, and I know there's a lot of people out there throwing cash offers out, but ours is cash from a checking account. Not cash from some other investor we're trying to assign it over to, or cash from some crafty, creative type of financing method that'll produce a fake proof of funds. It's cash from a Wells Fargo account, right? So just letting you know a little bit about us. Now you've automatically locked out a lot of the other people that are giving them offers, because now they're looking for those signs, those indicators of that type of cash offer. that bullshit proof of funds, right? You tell them flat out, hey, by the way, we do a lot of properties in this area. Feel free to call Indiana Title and ask them about us anytime you want, or Merit Title and ask them about us. They'll tell you a thing or two. We're your most certain buyer in this market. And instantly, they're probably not going to call. You're locking out their other alternatives because now they're looking for reasons for uncertainty. And then number 8 is justification, and specific justification. Whenever you make a rebuttal of some sort, a counter of some sort to the price, to the terms of their offer when you're actually talking about numbers, a lot of people just go, well, in this condition, I need it to be cheaper. No, you need a clear justification. You got to go, hey, I was looking around some properties in the area and I saw a few. There was one specifically on 123 Main Street that sold for this price pretty recently, and it took 2 months on the market to sell. So it must have been a pretty decent deal. It was a lower price than what you were asking. And, I don't know everything about the property, but it looked like the units were pretty remodeled, and it had a fenced in yard and twice the lot size. So I just don't think that your property could be worth as much as this one, even if I did clean it up. And then to clean it up, I'm gonna have to do a couple things. You talked about the roof. Hey, we got 2 long-term tenants, and I know they're all right now, but before I can make money, they're gonna eventually have to move, and that might take some time, and then I'm gonna have to spend 10 grand on each unit. So naturally, I need a little bit of room on top of that, and you're gonna have to take that value and pay realtor fees and closing costs out of it on the uncertain open market. So you got to leave a little bit of room for me to make some money as well. You got to itemize the reductions that you're looking for, right? And make them very clear, and not to the point that you're beating the seller to death, right? But you've got to be able to step in and say, well, hey, this is worth this amount, and this is worth this amount. And working with me directly with your buyer, a corporation going off market, that's worth a certain amount too, on top of your savings of realtor fees and closing costs, which is also worth a certain amount. And when you show them the numbers, I've even told sellers, hey, I know this sounds crazy because you're thinking 150, but when you actually math it out, like when I tell you 95, that even sounded a little crazy to me at first, but when I put the numbers to paper, it actually makes a lot of sense. So bear with me here and just give them a justification. Now, the reality is, whether they want to agree with you or not is up to them, right? But if they have the openness to agreeing with you, really for any of these 8 negotiation tactics, presenting them and utilizing them will cause this openness to materialize, right? And you'll be able to convert on this openness. But sometimes the openness, it's latent, it's inside, and the seller doesn't even know they have it until you really make a demonstration. And that demonstration starts with word number 1 and it ends with the final signature on the final closing docs. So I'm gonna give you these 8 again. I'm sorry I went a little over, so you have to be watching the YouTube version to get to this point. But number 1 is your energy. Control that, match the seller, bring it down deliberately to demonstrate stoicism. Number 2 is your control over the communications process. Number 3 is detaching yourself from the outcome of the deal. You do not want to be emotionally attached to winning the deal. Number 4 is the order in which you ask certain questions and collect certain information in order to stack up negotiation in your favor. Number 5 is the feedback you give as information is exchanged along the way, right? And doing so in a subtle manner to establish a sense of value and boundaries with a seller. Number 6 is the value that you provide to the seller simply by being credible, simply by being legitimate. And to be legitimate, you gotta know what the fuck you're doing, right? There's no easy way to do that, except for learning the business and having a good business model that can perform and can execute, right? And you will naturally convey that once you have those things. Number 7 is setting up locks to alternatives throughout the process so that when it comes time for the seller to make a decision, you are one of fewer decisions than they thought they initially had when you started talking to them. And number 8 is a clear and specific justification for every term or price that you intend to offer to the seller. Right? Detailed, itemized reasons that have a tangible value to them that is almost impossible for the seller to refute. In fact, it is impossible for the seller to refute that a roof costs money, right? But some things are very difficult to refute when you present them properly. So that's our 1 through 8. This was a really good one, and actually this was like a one shot for me. I literally have 8 numbers written down for these things. I don't have any notes besides them, and it came out well, so I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope you can utilize this session to actually change the outcome of the deals that you do. Have a good weekend, y'all.